Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Diablo 4 Season 5. Today I'm talking about the best builds for all the classes. What is the one build that generally does everything best for all of the classes currently? We've had at least 1 week with the game now, at least the season, to kind of understand how things are performing. Personally, I've had enough time to commit to a build to have multiple mythic uniques and really get it close to the maximum that can really get it reasonably in a week's playtime. And the same could be said for every hardcore grinder out there, whatever class they're playing. We've been able to take a look at how things are performing, say how people are doing in the new gameplay, the infernal hordes and the tier 8, the current cap, what's their DPS output, how they're dealing with the bosses, how they're dealing with mobbing in general, as well as the previous guideline, which was pits, and the general clear levels for that. So we think we've got a pretty good handle on what everyone's best build is overall. So let's just get into it, starting with my class, Necromancer. Now the best build for the Necromancer, and seemingly for the season, was predicted before it even began. It was the top build of Season 4 at the end, it was the top build in PTR, and it seems to be the top build, at least right now, for the current content, it's Bone Spirit. As you can see with my gameplay here, I've already got it hitting up to 5 billion in one button press, one Bone Spirit cast. The problem here is obviously I've got a lot of setup to do before that, but I can maintain between 3 and 4 billion between the bigger hits as well, so it's very impressive damage. That is probably the highest burst single number that you're going to see in today's video, but it doesn't equate to the highest DPS. Rogues are dealing way more consistent DPS compared to us, and their numbers are smaller, there's just a lot more of them a lot faster. Still, our single target DPS is good. On the other hand, we have survivability. You can become very tanky with a Necromancer, but the requirements are kind of insane. You've got to stack a lot of max health. You're going to need at least the Shaco's Mythic Unique Helm, and I'm running Doombringer personally, which is a pile of extra DR. If I was going to really push, say they added tier 9 and tier 10 soon, which they plan to mid-season for Infernal Hordes, I'd need more survivability. Even with the shields that I have, the massive health, and all that DR, I need more in that context. Right now, I think I could push towards a tier 130, but I'd have to back off on damage and go for more survivability, say running a Tyrael's Might chest piece, so I do think we can push a little further than we are right now, but the effective time to value ratio compared to other classes with this build is lacking. And what I mean by that is Infernal Hordes. The explosion radius of Bone Spirit, no matter what you do, even if you double increase it with your 2 weapons, it's not big enough. There's a delay before you're going to press the next Bone Spirit, there's a small cooldown on say Corpse Tendrils or your Bone Prison. Basically, it's a setup build, and so you need to set up the situation. In Infernal Hordes, say there's mobs all around the ring, I can pull a pack of them in a corner, but I can't pull the whole ring. And there's a cooldown between each pull. So I'm simply not able to provide consistent damage to maintain high kill pace, to then spawn an event and farm that out. When there's elites and something for me to smash, I destroy it. But I'm not generating the progress bar to spawn events nearly as fast as other builds or other classes. I think adaptation's going to be needed for Bone Spirit, where we go more into the Bone Splinters route, which is much more AoE, or of course Blood Surge, which is essentially a living wall. There's lots of gameplay perks where, hey, we actually have unstoppable, we actually have a bit of mobility. It's an AoE monster, so it's going to be amazing for Infernal Hordes and pushing your Aether as high as possible. However, single target output is trash compared to Bone Spirit, so when you get to the final bosses, that'd be a problem. Overall, I think Bone Spirit is our best option right now, but exploration is worthy to do with Blood Surge and potentially Bone Splinters focus build as well. Now time will tell, but I think right now Bone Spirit is just a top performer overall. It's able to handle everything. It's just not the best Aether farmer, specifically Infernal Hordes. Alright, moving on to Rogue. This one is obvious. Everyone and their mother is running the andariel based build right now, which is an unfortunate statement in its own way. Do you remember when Druids bore the cross that was specific uniques being required to run this or that build, and it just didn't work without it? Back then it was harder to get uniques quick and easy, but now at least it's a lot easier by comparison. Compared to that, a mythic unique being required for your main build and best build, that is rough. Though at least it is easier to get them between the crafting mechanic, all the bosses dropping them and so on. Either way, that's the reality. Andariel is the core of the build, but why? You're essentially building massive attack speed combined with lucky at chance to force out these poison imbued barrages. They're proccing the Andariel poison burst, even if they're not hitting hard themselves. Technically, there are other options you could use for a core skill for this Andariel proc concept, but barrage does it the best. It does it at a medium range, you hit many enemies in a wide arc, and you're able to constantly fire it off, so there's no downtime. You can manage the enemies with death traps and preparation to help reset your cooldowns. The hits are just doing work, there's billions of them per second, second, the procs are smashing whatever gets hit. It's this wall of pretty wide-reaching barrage attacks. On top of that, you've got things like the second wind passive to help generate a barrier per energy spent. The result is this big-ass barrier for easy survivability if anything does hit you. And then the utility of the build is only enhanced by that new unique, the Umbercrux weapon. That spawns a little totem for you, or the party, you can attack, and it soaks up damage and then spreads it out in a little AoE. Meaning with your ultra-fast attack speed, you always have something at least to attack between phases or grouping. And it just helps with a single target burst too. Further, they've got some passive silliness going on, like the precision key passive being a multiplier with itself, the Sky Hunter bow providing all this crit damage, but also enhancing precision directly. Trick attacks is giving this weird stacking crit chance and crit damage buff during either stuns or dazes for more than it should. So there's weird stuff going on top of the hyper effective core that is just barrage and andariels combined. It hits hard, it hits super fast, it's very survivable, and it's bugged in helpful ways. So I think Rogue looks like the king of the season right now with this build in particular. Moving on to the next class then, it's time we talk Sorcerer. And what's interesting about Sorcerer is how they have these, well, multiple seriously high scaling options for the endgame. They've seemingly done the best in Season 5 for variety's sake at least. But obviously we're talking about best build, and for that I talked to Josh, who is a Sorcerer main for the channel. He says it's clearly Lightning Spear, and I can agree. It's a new build for the season that's incredibly effective, but does have some pretty steep requirements. Basically, an Exodia level style of gear collection, where you must reach the extreme requirements for it to function as well as it can and should, which is actually how I would compare Bone Spirit Necromancer as a concept. But when you're going, it's obviously insane and worth it. The build comes together with the newly buffed / reworked splintering energy aspect. It takes the lightning spear and increases its base power by over 5 times, which is crazy as a base because that's going to scale up. Suddenly, a completely unused concept is a top tier one, and that's great to see after so many seasons of underwhelming buffs for underused builds that, you know, still need more. Specifically though, this build is combined with the Fractured Winterglass unique, an amulet that has a chance to spawn those conjurations after Frozen Orb is cast. Now these conjurations have this high chance to throw out their own frozen orbs, like you're hurling these massive waves of orbs around with the right stats and enough lucky hit. These two concepts combined then push the build into the meta, but it's not until you start to reach the high end gear that it comes together. You'll need like max masterworks, extremely high CDR, crit chance and the lucky hit to make it all work. One of the most valuable items in the game right now has become the Fists of Fate, where the lucky hit chance great graphics roll on it for that reason. But when you do achieve this Exodia style state, as I said, you become essentially a machine gun of frozen orbs, spreading them everywhere. For some, that might actually be considered a downside if you don't want to find yourself spamming your buttons at all times like you're a rogue, because the moment you drop that APM, the value is going to drop. But, you know, maybe the idea of hyper actions per minute does appeal. This is easily worth the effort. The output does speak for itself. But this is all on top of, you know, base Sorcerer in Season 5, meaning fantastic mobility to get around, the hilarious survivability they just have. Any build around shock is easy to make tanky, to the point that you can just stand there in any normal or even mid-tier content just soaking it up. The only downside for the class in general is their relative boss DPS, which is staggeringly less impressive compared to their clear speeds, but you know, Infernal Hordes is 3 bosses instead of 1, so you probably won't even notice it there. So for the end of our first week, we think Lightning Spear looks to be standing above the rest. Alright, next up then we have Druid, and what seems to be their clear winner so far, Landslide. The idea is simple: become the earthquaking bear, spreading your floor-shattering smashes all around you at a medium to close range, alongside whirlwinds of tornadoes and lightning strikes. With wide enough spread to clean up packs of mobs super easy with consistent damage to be, well, perfect in Infernal Hordes from mob clear. With the right setup, it's constant and you're in bear most of the time, right? So you're very sustainable too. This footage is by iBoiler Up, a consistent top Druid player per season, just dominating this tier 8 horde without even breaking a sweat. Constantly full health, fortified, spamming attacks in the right spot, never really concerned about what's being thrown at him. And it's not just the quakes, it's tornadoes and lightning strikes, like I said, getting bigger range to the attacks all around him. When we look at single target damage by comparison, it's definitely at least reasonable here compared to Rogue and Sorcerer's madness. It's not burning through the health as quickly, as impressively, but it's still impressive. It's still very good DPS, and the stagger build-up from the constant attacking is nothing to ignore. Building up the stagger very quick, and stopping incoming damage before it even starts. That stunning is obviously available against elites and just hard shutting them down in normal clear. It would appear there's a very good way to run a build like this, and the consistent top performing version is based on Nature's Fury, a key passive that causes earth skills to potentially trigger a free storm skill, or vice versa. So the storm strikes give you free landslides, but then the landslides give you free storm strikes, letting you kind of permanently spam between them. Newly improved Earthbreaker or Unique Ring means your landslides are leaving these tectonic spikes down, which if you hit with a landslide, might spawn 2 of them. So you've got extra landslides, but then with the unsung Ecstatic Glove unique, these cause Lightning Storm to strike extra times too, like a perfect synergy between them. That for your spammy output, alongside the Bear form to stay tanky, mixing in some poison damage to enhance the output, and Petrify for that fast stun build-up we're looking at, it can kind of handle it all. Overall, I think the output isn't as impressive as some of the other stuff we've looked at today, but the lack of pressure during a tier 8 at any point is what's most impressive about this. The control through the stuns, the wide ability to kill everything around you cannot be underrated for clearing tier 8 hordes, and no doubt tier 9 and 10 when that comes. So landslide seems to be the obvious top choice for druids. But last up, we need to talk about Barb, which is kind of difficult to say. We saw a huge burst in the whirlwind popularity at the start of the season, and still now, it's great for leveling, but also speed farming. There's no doubt that whirlwind combined with the awesome Dust Devil tornadoes is a fun and effective way to do mob clear. Constant spinning while nados fly out and around you, which you can even increase the size of them, so it's just perfect. As Rob showcases here, it can also be used pretty damn well in single target for tormented boss farming, and that's important because it's what we're doing a lot of. By pressing yourself against a wall and spinning on the spot, making use of the inner calm aspect to boost damage while not moving, it's a pretty clever trick. But this footage is using outrageously good gear. Like we mentioned for Bone Spirit and Lightning Spear, you're gonna need really high-end gear to get it to work at this level. In fact, in this footage, I think he's wearing 4 mythics, which is ridiculous. It is no easy thing to reach this level of output then. Clearly the result speaks for itself. Clearing through packs of enemies, farming infernal hordes like it's nothing, but at the cost of real long-term single target DPS, because even in lower tier pits, the final bosses that are less, stable to maximize the DPS, moving around, iframing, having mechanics you have to move around, that proves a lot more of a challenge, losing that build-up of DPS by a significant margin. So we're starting to see a return of Bash Barb to combat that, which is much better for single target. The current Bash Barb is capable of roughly 1 billion in a hit, which might sound weaker than it truly is. Since we did look at Bone Spirit earlier, landing 5 billion in one button press, it's not actually an accurate way to look at it. Bone Spirit has an actual delay between each spirit, whereas Bash Barb is spamming a basic attack, landing much more consistent DPS that is easy to argue is better over time. And also, Barbarian in general, just very tanky inherently. It has those buffs with the shouts, it moves quicker, it's got some unstoppable options that aren't a self-CC. So while the two are very comparable with their small radius on the attack, yet, big massive hits, I think Bash Barb has much more effective, consistent DPS. So they're similar and they have similar issues, but at least Bash Barb has the new Shard of Varithiel, the unique sword that actually plays into the new Bash Barb concept because it gives up to 200% times increased damage on basic skills. Perfect for this build, but it does make the basic start to cost resources. So to manage and combat that, you're going to need something extremely important, the Starless Skies Mythic Unique Ring, which helps with resource gen in that situation, which means it's got ridiculously high requirements to function as a build where it gets good. So we're in the season of extremely demanding builds, it would seem. In any case, between Whirlwind and Bash, they do very different things very well. Bash is the better single target option, but Whirlwind is much more relevant for what we're doing in Season 5, Infernal Hordes. So if I had to pick one, I would lean on Whirlwind, but let me know what you guys think. But yeah, there you have it. That's our overview of the best builds for each class in Season 5, after our first week of serious grind. Personally, I am ready to go outside and touch grass now, but I'll be sure to see how things develop as the season really settles. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.